Hi there, my name is Travis, and I wanted to talk about the spiritual and ceremonial use of cannabis. And I really want to share some of my experiences and perspectives working with cannabis over the last few years. And, cannabis for thousands of years has been used in different spiritual traditions. The most obvious one is in India, there's different cults that worship the god Shiva, and they associate the plant cannabis with Shiva. And so they'll work with this drink called bong, which is like cannabis infused into a milk that they'll drink. And there's also they'll smoke it out chillum pipes. And I don't know as much about those traditions, so I don't want to go too much into those. But just want to share that this has been used for a long time. Some people even say that it's referenced in the Bible, or that Jesus might have been healing people with cannabis oil and all these different interesting things. I think it's worth looking into if you're interested in religions and spiritual history of cannabis. Um, but for me, cannabis, I started smoking it when I was young, and it was just for fun. And also, pretty early on, I thought, like, I really like to smoke cannabis and think about life, talk to my friends about life. And I felt like it kind of opened up my thoughts and my heart and my mind and helped me see things from a new perspective. And sometimes that was really helpful for developing new ways of looking at life or new ways of solving problems in my life. And so early on, cannabis was really an insightful thing for me, even though I was just using it for fun or to help me feel good sometimes. But it wasn't until I actually started working with another plant called tobacco. Sometimes I call it mapacho because I work with the natural Amazonian tobacco, Nicotiana rustica. It's different than what you find in tobacco shops up in the US. When I started working with mapacho, I found the mapacho was too strong for me on its own. I wasn't used to smoking tobacco. So I started sprinkling just little bits of it into my cannabis, and I would roll a spliff with that. And my favorite place to smoke a spliff is out in the forest or on the beach, somewhere outdoors in nature. And so, because I wanted to connect with the spirit of the tobacco plant, I started praying when I would smoke these spliffs. But as soon as I was okay, I want to pray to tobacco, and then I realized, well, there's a lot of cannabis in here too. I should pray to cannabis too, and I don't know why I never really prayed to cannabis or set intentions with it before. Um, but that's how the idea and the inspiration to do that came to me, was through working with tobacco. And so I started praying every time I smoked cannabis after that. And pretty quickly, it completely changed my relationship with cannabis. I started moderating my use a lot more, and I started becoming more sensitive to it. And I started realizing that I only needed a little bit, and that it started talking to me more and connecting with me in a different way. And I started viewing it more as a teacher and a medicine more than something to just help me feel good in the moment. So I eventually developed a couple different ways of working with cannabis that really helped me in ceremony. Obviously, when you're working with another plant medicine, say you're working with San Pedro or magic mushrooms or something like that, cannabis can help open up those medicines sometimes and help you connect a little bit more deeply with them. When I combine cannabis with another plant medicine, though, I found it's better to just use a tiny bit of the cannabis. If you smoke too much, the cannabis will kind of take over. It's an incredibly powerful master plant, and it'll take over, and you'll just get really stoned and you'll feel great. But I noticed, like, if I'm working with San Pedro and I smoke too much cannabis, it takes over and San Pedro stops talking to me, and I stop really having a San Pedro experience, and I just get really stoned. But I found, I usually like to smoke later in the ceremony, so I have some time just with whatever the initial plant medicine I'm working with is. But later in the ceremony, if it sounds like, I feel like cannabis would be nice in the ceremony right now, I'll take a second to pray with some cannabis. I'll usually have mapacho, the tobacco, mixed in with it, and I'll just take one or two small little puffs. And just that little bit helps open up the other plant medicine that I'm working with, like San Pedro. It helps open it up a little bit more so I can have a little bit stronger experience with the San Pedro. And for me, cannabis is extremely visionary. Pretty much anytime I smoke it, I'll start having visions. I know it's not like that for everybody, but I think it's more common with people who work a lot in ceremony with plant medicines. Cannabis will start becoming more powerful and more visionary for you. And I think that's because you're opening up different parts of your energy and your mind, and so you see different parts of the cannabis. So for me with San Pedro is not always very visual, but cannabis will often make it a little bit more visual for me. So one of my favorite ways to do a cannabis ceremony is a lighter ceremony. A long time ago, I was interested in something called core shamanism, where you learn this method of drumming and trying to enter a trance to have a journey. And I never really liked the drum or resonated with journey in that way. But I used the same intention, just working with cannabis and tobacco together in a spliff and smoking outside. I had the inspiration that maybe I can journey with this and maybe this will help me. So I would go find a quiet spot where I'm private out in nature, and I would have an intention. I could tell you a specific story. One time I was trying to decide between should I move into this house or this other house? Which house should I move into? And I didn't know, so I thought I'll ask cannabis and I'll do a ceremony and ask my spirit guides. So I decided I was going to do this type of shamanic journey with cannabis and tobacco. So I went down, I had a spliff with cannabis and tobacco, and I thought about the two houses, and I prayed, and I asked for guidance, and I blew my prayers into the spliff before I smoked it, and then I lit it up. Just took 2 or 3 little puffs, I didn't need very much, and then I leaned back and closed my eyes, and I tried to, with my mind, kind of grab onto the smoke as it was drifting up, and I let that smoke kind of carry me into my journey. So instead of drumming and going into, like in core shamanism, they often have you visualize like a hole you will go into. I just grabbed onto the smoke, and in my mind I could see myself coming through a cloud of smoke. And when I came through the other side, I was with my spirit guides, and I saw this hummingbird, and the hummingbird showed me which house I should move to. And it was funny because my wife was with me, and we were doing the ceremony together, and we were both asking the same question: which house should we move into? And I open my eyes, and she opens her eyes at the same exact time. We look at each other, and I say, "We saw the same house." And she said, "Yep." And I said, "We're moving to this one just outside of this park where we're at." And she said, "Yep." And I knew as soon as she opened her eyes that we'd both seen the same exact thing. And it was funny because we left the park after that meditation and walked to the house, and I saw 2 hummingbirds fly in 3 circles around the house and then come fly past us and fly off. And it was just this really cool confirmation that, yeah, that was a genuine ceremony, and having some genuine connection and insight right there. So that's one of the ways I like to work with cannabis, and that's probably the way I work with it the most often. And I find combining a little bit of the tobacco with it helps focus and strengthen the cannabis a little bit. So it's a little bit of a more focused and alert experience. The tobacco kind of wakes you up and focuses your mind a little bit. So you don't feel quite as stoned or lethargic with the cannabis. And I find that's great for when I want insights. I also find that anytime I smoke cannabis, usually I'll smoke it and it feels, oh, nice, I'm relaxed, this is pleasant. But sometimes it'll bring up anxiety for me, and a lot of people are worried about anxiety with cannabis. And I actually found for me, whenever it brings up anxiety, I'll start thinking about what's causing the anxiety. And it's not the cannabis that's causing the anxiety. I can share another personal experience. Before I had my baby girl, I was having all this anxiety about her health. What if the birth doesn't go right? What if she's born and it's fine, but then she gets sick and I have to take her to hospital? And I was just stressing out as a new parent, like worried about my child's health. Even though she's healthy, I was just worried about it anyways. And so I started smoking cannabis, and I would start thinking about all these things I was worried about her health. And so I realized, wow, I have a lot of fear around her health that I need to work through. So the cannabis was actually showing and exposing this to me and helping me recognize it so that I could deal with it and work through it. And so then I would go to the park and I would do either a cannabis and tobacco ceremony, or sometimes I would use the rape. It's a tobacco snuff, and I would use that to work through the energy and work through the fears that I had. And I was able to actually do that over, took me like 2 or 3 days, a couple little meditations to work through that. And then I felt great, and the anxiety wasn't there anymore. And so it wasn't something like, oh, I'm feeling anxious when I smoke, I need to stop smoking. It was more like, I'm feeling anxious when I smoke. What is the cannabis trying to show me and teach me and tell me? And so that's how you work with cannabis as a teacher. You don't use it to repress bad feelings. You use it to expose yourself to your own heart. And once you see what's in your heart and you see If there's anything there that you're not looking at or not dealing with, you can give it the attention that it needs. So there's another way of working with cannabis that I've been experimenting with, and this was actually something that was taught to me during an ayahuasca ceremony. So I drank ayahuasca ceremony. It was a Shipibo style ceremony, and I hadn't been working with any cannabis recently, but ayahuasca started teaching me about cannabis and how I can use it in ceremony. So it showed me you can do something similar to an ayahuasca ceremony, but do it with cannabis. And so I had these visions of sitting in total darkness, complete silence, except for medicine songs and icaros. And it told me for this style of ritual, get really, really, really stoned. Like so stoned that some people are going to purge, just like an ayahuasca ceremony. And so, like ingesting really large amounts of cannabis, either through edibles or using bongs or like something where you can smoke a lot of cannabis and get a stronger effect. And it showed me that smoking to the point where you're having visions and where some people might purge, and guiding the ceremony through prayers, intentions, and ikros or medicine songs, and using the medicine songs to help contain and focus the ceremony so that it's a little bit more productive. I've been experimenting with ceremonies like this for a while now, and they've actually been incredibly powerful. Sometimes, actually, for me, more insightful or powerful than some of the ayahuasca ceremonies I've had. And to me, it just goes to show how powerful of a master plant cannabis can be when you actually put the correct work and intentions into it. Um, a lot of people use cannabis for recreation. I don't have any problem with that, but I think something changes when you view cannabis differently and when you change your relationship to it. And the relationship you have with it dictates a lot of what the cannabis is going to give you. So if you're just smoking it for fun, you're not having this intention to do healing work or, trying to find insights in your life. You're just trying to feel good. Well, that's what you're asking for. That's what you get. But when you ask for something else, I feel like the plant can respond to those intentions, especially if you take the time to cultivate an intentional relationship with the plant. So for me, I actually found that working with cannabis in this way, I stopped smoking it as often, stopped using it for recreation most of the time, and I felt like less desire to use it for recreation because it started becoming more powerful and I started becoming more and more sensitive to it the more I used it in ceremony. So now I don't smoke most days, but when I go in the forest, if I really want to connect with the forest, or if I really want to have a deeper connection with my wife while we're out on a hike or something, maybe I'll smoke a little cannabis and I'll just pray like, help me have a beautiful day and appreciate this forest and appreciate this time with my family. And the cannabis helps open my heart and helps facilitate that connection. Or sometimes we'll go and we'll find a beautiful spot in the forest and we feel like we want to sit here and meditate for an hour. So we'll just have a couple puffs and sit there and meditate. Or sometimes we'll go out and we'll think we want to do a deeper ceremony and we'll have a couple hours out in the forest or a couple hours in silent darkness where we do the stronger ceremony and we ingest a larger amount of cannabis and really pray and sing some medicine songs. And it's just like a plant medicine ceremony with any other entheogen or plant medicine, or it can be very powerful. I also know some people diet the plant cannabis just like you can do a master plant diet in the ayahuasca or Amazonian vegetalista traditions. You can diet cannabis. I actually know a couple of Shipibo shamans and mestizo shamans who have dieted cannabis, and they say it's one of the most, if not the most powerful master plant they've dieted before. And they use it in ceremony just like they use any other plant medicine ceremony. They call the spirit in with their icaros and with their songs and use that for helping heal their clients. I haven't dieted yet, but I'm hoping to diet it at some point. I think it's going to be a more advanced and challenging diet, but I'm looking forward to it. And I think if you're going to diet the plant, I recommend taking probably a couple months off before and at least a month off after, not using any cannabis, just so that you have a really pure, intentional connection with it during your diet. Just because I think it's a powerful plant, and I think some people that use it all the time start to develop a little bit of attachment, and I don't think you want to go into your diet with that. So I think it's good to have breaks. Even like when I dieted coca, I don't chew or drink any coca tea before and after the coca diet because it'll be too much. It'll reopen my diet again if I'm drinking it after the diet. So I think it's good to have space around your ceremonies and your diet. I even think I have the deepest ceremonies with cannabis if I haven't smoked in at least a couple days or even a couple weeks. Just you have less of a tolerance, and the experience becomes, you're reserving the plant for that type of experience. So it helps you build a really intentional connection with it. Now, if you've been working with cannabis recreationally for a long time and you want to work with it ceremonially, I think you can go straight into attempting to do the ceremonies like I'm describing with cannabis. If you do that and you feel like it's not really working, you're not getting what you're expecting from it, well, the first part might be to try and let go of expectations a little bit, but I also think it might help to maybe you want to take a break and let your tolerance go down, let give your relationship with it some space so that you can kind of shift something in your relationship with that plant. You might have a deeper ceremony. So I'm glad that I was able to share some of my thoughts and insights about using cannabis as a plant medicine. I hope this was insightful for you. And if you have any questions or thoughts or want to share some of your experiences working with cannabis for spiritual, mystical, and healing purposes, I'd love to hear some of your experiences. Thank you guys for listening. If you want to learn more about connecting with plant medicines, I recommend our website, soulremedy.org, or my book, The Plant Remedy. Thank you.